Accommodating resistance. So I first learned about accommodating resistance from Louis Simmons, who's a
Yep.
very large man who wears very tiny glasses, and I'm pretty sure can read German and Russian.
That would make sense actually, right? Like when I think of these, especially Russia, but when I think of like old European lifting countries, like Russia for sure, and I could see Germany being thrown in there. So if this guy is going to be the leader of the powerlifting world, I'm sure he's done his research on some of those old training methodologies, had to learn how to read them.
Yeah, and steroids, I think you learn Russian too.
Is there a steroid for Russian? Like,
Maybe Drago used it, I think.
okay, so you just take it and you learn Russian. Got you.
So, accommodating resistance is a theory that has been popularized by Louis Simmons of the conjugate method. The idea is as you move through a range of motion, you use a device to where the stronger point in that range of motion, the movement gets harder. So typically we do linear resistance. So it's the same weight as you go down in the bottom of a squat and the same weight as you come back up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in accommodating resistance, one way that we can do that is that we put a band around the bar. So we put it on the bar on either side, and then we attach it to a hook on the ground. So at the very top of the movement, the band is stretched the furthest, and the resistance is the highest, because at the top third of the squat, that's where you're the strongest. Then as you drop down lower and lower and lower into the squat, the band is giving less and less resistance, so you are able to move that weight easier. Then as you stand back up, it gets harder as you rise.
Yes, that's right. So there's like three main like ways to do it. The bands is the one, chains are the other common way to do it. But it's the same principle because as you stand up with chains hanging from a bar, more weight is now hanging from the bar as it rises off the ground versus when you're putting the chains on the ground. And then the other one is the releases. I don't know if you've seen like weight releases before, but they're common with the bench press for sure. They're little hooks that go on the end of the bar that they might be a couple feet long. So that way, when you hit the bottom of your bench press, the bottom of the hook attachment actually hits the ground, which causes it to detach from the bar.
That's cool. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, so they hook onto the end of the bar, and you can add like weights to them, and they're angled, like the bottom of it's angled a little bit, so that way when it hits the ground, it causes the hook to release off the bar, and then you can press up without that additional weight. So you could overload the eccentric.
So is that accommodating resistance, or is that just like an eccentric overload? And are they the same thing?
I would argue that it's a form of accommodating resistance. That's what I would think, because it's heavier on your stronger portion of the lift. I
Right.
mean, I'm sure you could classify however they classify those, definitions of what accommodating resistance is, but I would say it's the same principle.
Yeah, and the way that I think people forget is that you can do this with a spotter.
Yeah,
So if
100%.
you just have a spotter help you at the bottom of the lift and you do 8 to 10 reps, it's just not precise. Not that a band is really precise or chains is really precise, because it's hard to measure as you lift it off the ground. But the idea is they help you at the bottom, you get it off your chest, and then you can finish strong. And that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, you could be pretty precise with chains, right? Because you could always use the same chains and you could always do them like in the same place, like on the same platform or whatever. So
Yeah.
you could be pretty precise with chains. Bands, they change, right? They get weaker, or you might not get the same band.
We actually did a band resistance test with a push-up before. So we put our hands on the scale, and then we put the band on the floor, and we tested what our body weight was at the top and what it was at the bottom of the differential. So it was like, I think that we used a green monster band from Rogue, and I think it was a 50-pounder at, I guess you'd call it like 2x, roughly 2x distance on a stretch. So you can test this on a squat rack. If you put a band on your back, the band is attached to the floor, you stand on the scale, you measure your weight at the top, and then you measure your weight again at the bottom so you can actually see what the difference is.
Yeah, it's really cool. And
It's a
it's
lot of work to solve a problem that doesn't really exist, though.
yeah. It's always funny though because like it always seems like you always think in your mind, if you haven't done this type of training before, you always think that you can put relatively the same amount of weight on that you always put on and just add a band. But often it doesn't work out well like that. You end up using a lot lighter weight to keep it safe. But
I will say I'm extremely less sore compared to when I'm doing a comparable weight on the bar with a linear resistance pattern.
that makes sense to me though, because like for squats, for example, you know, that bottom of the squat is going to be lighter, right, than what it would be
Yeah.
otherwise. So
Yeah,
so
that's the amortization phase.
the amortization phase. What
Amortization.
so what do you think is the main benefit of doing accommodating resistance?
So I think all of Louis' programming is you can lift the least amount of weight or with the like and get the maximal result.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, exactly. So what's like the minimum input that you can give the system for the maximum output, right? How
Yeah,
efficient can
yeah.
you be, right? I
Yeah,
like
and I like it too because you can develop speed strength with bands too.
that's that's what I was going to say was the main characteristic that you're trying to change is the speed. That's what I was going to say. And then speed obviously will help you lift more weight.
Hmm.
But I like how you phrased it, like trying to get the best, use the minimum weight for the maximum results. I like that.
Yeah, no, I do think people get this wrong a lot though. So take for example the pull up, right?
Mhm.
So you have a eccentric and concentric. Concentric is when you're pulling up, eccentric is when you're lowering back down, right? So where is the strength curve? What does the strength curve look like for the pull up? Like what's the easiest part of the pull up?
The easiest part of the pull up is probably in the middle somewhere, I would think.
Right. So to do an accommodating resistance, you put a band on you, and as you pull up, it gets harder and harder and harder. But the top is usually the hardest.
It's still very hard. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like it's getting easier. Now, if you flip the band the other way, you're getting the most amount of help at the bottom. And I think the bottom, like that initial pull, is the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
So the people who are learning to do pull-ups with band assistance, where the band is helping them go up, is actually opposite of the strength curve.
Hmm.
So as you get closer to the top, right, everyone gets like 3/4 of the way from the bar and then they can't quite make it. And then
No.
that's where the band is helping you the least.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. I'm just wondering because the only reason why I'm wondering is because there's so many people who otherwise can't do a pull up, right? So
Mhm.
the band is obviously doing something, right? It's just not doing this what accommodating resistance is intended to do.
Right. It would be accommodating assistance,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
which is totally cool. And there's like some, what do they call it? The new wave method where it is literally the opposite. So you tie a band around a pull-up bar over you and you do a bench press so the band helps you at the bottom. And that's just reversing the strength curve or the assistance. So I like accommodating resistance for speed, and I like pairing it with a low to no weight plyometric movement.
Okay.
So a banded deadlift paired with a box jump,
Box jump, yeah.
one of my favorite, or a triple jump or a broad jump or
Yeah.
a single leg jump and reach kind of thing. I think you really, really can get more performance without changing anything physiologically.
Yeah.
It's like purely neurological adaptation, which is cool because that means you don't have to get bigger, you don't have to get heavier. You're the same person, but you can be stronger than you were before that.
I like that.
I do get sore from those though.
From what, the pairings?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I do like those combinations. I still like how you phrased it though, because I think that is pretty much the key of like that's the name of the whole strength training game, right? And no matter what you're talking about, is what's the minimum input I can do here to get the type of change that I want. And so I think that's just a really good way to think about it. So how can you increase your speed, your bar speed, without overloading your system unnecessarily? And that's what the the bands or chains can do.